All right, let's see. It's 5 o'clock here, so we can get started. So today we're going to actually first I should say I'm Sam from Growth Galleries. If you're not familiar with me, I come on here every week to give you instruction on how to capture astrophotography or how to edit your photos after you've imported them to your computer. So today we're going to cover probably a more advanced topic in panorama merging and editing. This process will be covered over some photos that I took over the last summer when I was in Colorado here. If you're more at the beginner stage, right, some of the things that I'm covering might be beyond your level of knowledge and experience, but you could probably learn from them. But if you're feeling like you're completely in over your head, I created a couple videos recently that are much closer to a beginner level where you could jump right in and feel comfortable as long as you can get your photos imported into Lightroom Classic and then just do edits there. If that's where your comfort zone is and you're wanting to learn about that, check out my other videos. But for everyone else, welcome to the video here, and we're going to get started by merging the panoramas that I've chosen. So first of all, we need to pick a software to merge our photos, right? So there's quite a few different softwares that will do this for you. Lightroom has some software for integrating panoramas, which works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work all that great. For other use cases, sometimes Photoshop works. And then for me now, I've moved on to some professional software called PT GUI, which works better and it gives me a lot more options as far as the projections I can do with the images that I'm trying to merge together. So to get started here, we're going to go to PT GUI Pro here. We're going to load images, and I have very good organization here. Everything is stored on my desktop. So we're going to find these Blue Lakes pictures. So I spent the night out photographing the mountains that are visible from near the Blue Lakes trailhead here in Colorado. So if we go to panoramas and individual shots, you can see we have some photos here. Let's see. And you can see that this is right away a panorama. And you can see it's the full Milky Way. And let's see, is that the last one? I think that's the last one. All right, so I think if we do 43 to 50, we import these, and then we see that they've been imported in source images here. It looks like the images are mostly aligned here. And then we're going to click Align Images and see what PT GUI comes up with. So it looks like it's not sharing the screen. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and try to start sharing the... see, can I share there? Let's the entire screen. Hopefully that I won't have to switch back and forth. And can I switch between? Oh yeah, perfect. That's exactly what I want. All right. So you can see that it effectively merged this panorama of the Milky Way. And you can see that where each of the 8 images is included in the panorama. You can see the mountains at the base of the Milky Way here, and then the tree at the other end. And so this is looking like a pretty clean arch. So right now, by default, it's using some equirectangular spherical projection. And you can see that's actually not doing a terrible job, but let's see what other options we have here. So basically, if we choose cylindrical, usually, like I expect that to stretch the image, make it taller. If we come down here, select full frame fisheye, I expect it to try to image, which it does seem to do a little bit. And it seems to think the top of the sky is the center of the image, and if there was more data there, it would center the whole image around the sky, which would be like a pretty cool 180. And then you can try different projections here. This one is stereographic. I don't know the exact mathematical results or definitions behind these different projections, but I do know that the spherical projection, the cylindrical projection, and then the Mercator projection are the three that I like the results of the most in the tests that I've done myself. So you can see there's going to be a lot of flexibility with this image with how much of the sky we want to show. So the Milky Way is really low on the horizon. So if we want to highlight just the Milky Way in the final image, we'll be able to select just the bottom part of this image and crop out the rest of the sky. And if we want to show a lot of the sky and just make a lot of framing based on how much of the foreground is showing, we can also do that. So let's grab the edges here in the PT GUI here so we can do a bit of a crop here. So I don't think we're going to need all the top of the sky there. And we've got a lot of space on the right side here. So I'm just going to generously crop that off here. And we'll also crop in on the left side a little bit here. So we don't have to deal with warping the thing in Photoshop, which another advanced topic. So now that we have this projection, you'll notice that the colors here might be off, right? This is, again, an Astro modified camera that I generally use, and it gives a pinkish reddish hue. So I'm going to export this image now. And in order to do that, I'm going to go back over to this Create Panorama button here in PT GUI. It's going to bring up the settings here that you choose for saving the file. So I have changed the defaults. I think they're JPEG and some other settings, but I want to save as a TIFF file with 16-bit compression. So you can either, after you hit Create Panorama, come here, change these values, or you can go into the settings up here, and then probably there's I don't remember exactly which one of these menus here will allow you to change the save settings. And I'm not finding it off the top here. I did not plan, but it's that you have the ability, or if you look through the editable settings, to change it for this to be the default. And so since I have a Apple M2 chip in my computer, I can use this batch stitcher, which will allow me to actually save the photo faster. So I choose the location. I'm going to keep the file name here so I know which set of files I use for this panorama, and I'm going to save it. And while that's processing, we're going to come back here, and we'll wait for a second for that to complete. Actually, we need to merge the foreground next. All right, cool. So it completed. So what we'll do is we'll come back to the create new here in the top left corner. So that resets all of the images. You can see the main panorama editor is also reset. And now we'll look for a proper foreground panorama to merge with this. So I did a whole bunch of sky panoramas. So let's see if we can find a foreground one here to merge. All right, so we're looking for that bush. All right, so I think this is the first image, so 7588. And we'll go through here and see which ones we want to include. So cool, mountain. And I think 9.5 will be the last one. All right, there's a bunch of light there. I wonder where that's coming from. Maybe there was a car that drove by. See if we can find a different, yeah, it looks like there's a car. All right, so let's start with 797 here. See if there's any cars driving through this image. So when you're shooting a shot like this, you have a lot of things to think about. So this is interesting. I actually have a time lapse shooting in the middle of this, so we may have to edit that out in Photoshop. So we'll that should be really easy to do. All right, let's pick this one. I actually like the car in there. I think it looks kind of cool. All right, let's see. Looks like there's some planes in the sky there. Also 797 to 804. So let's use these photos, and then we'll do the same thing we did with the sky. We'll align the images, and there is a chance this doesn't work, and we have to go back and brighten. Yeah, see, this did not work at all. So what I do in that case is I would brighten all of the images and then re-import them. So if we come here, Project Assistant, we're going to want to start over. So if we come over to Photoshop and we want to open, let's see, desktop, and we go down to Blue Lakes 2, pass the visual shot, we want 797 to 4. It should open these in Camera Raw. And so then what we can do is we don't want to increase the sharpening because that might add some noise. We can drop the color noise a little bit. And then we'll come here and just increase the exposure on the images like this. All right, you don't want to get too far out so that things are overexposed. And while we're here, we might as well just apply some, where is it? Lens correction here, which will help with the merging the panorama as well. There might be less of a chance of vignetting causing problems. So now we have these images, so we'll go through them really quickly here. You can see very clearly now that there's the tripod for the time lapse. That's in the middle of the frame. We'll have to edit that out, but you can see the shot of the mountain. And so if the mountain itself here looks a little bit too bright, we'll probably fix that to make it look a little bit more natural in the final image. But for purposes of merging the panorama, I think we want things to be bright enough so that the panorama software can detect the relevant points in the image. So what we'll do here is we'll select the desktop, and we're doing everything out of Blue Lakes 2 here. We'll create a new folder and say this is the foreground. We'll create that. We'll select this directory. We want to save the files as TIFF files. And the rest of the settings here are just default. So there's nothing special going on here. I just select the output folder and the file format, and then we'll hit save. And it'll take a sec here. You can see in the bottom left corner that Camera Raw is exporting the images. So if you've never used Camera Raw, it's a really fantastic tool in my opinion. It allows you to quickly edit photos. I've even been using it a lot more than I've even been using Lightroom Classic or Lightroom, the online version. So now that we've exported those photos, we'll come back here to PT GUI. And we'll select new project again. It's going to ask us if we want to save. We don't want to save here because the last attempt didn't work. So we'll load in the images, and we're going to go here. So now they're in the foreground folder where we saved them to. We'll take these, import them. And then now if we hit align, hopefully PTGUI can find the points and build a proper image. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to join in the chat, and I'll try to make sure that I'm following up on those and getting your questions answered. So we have here the full merge shot. It looks relatively good to me, actually. We might want to try to flatten the horizon line if we can. But to be honest, this actually looks a lot like the scene there, what it looks like in person. So you see this Mount Sneffels in the background. This is a 14,000 foot peak. It's the tallest mountain in the particular range. And from this perspective, these hills look really tall, but these hills are really not that high up there. They're probably like 8,000, 9,000 feet, maybe 9,000 feet, because this, by the time you get to the shell, you're probably at 9,000 feet, but it's a little over 9,000 feet. So it's not nearly as high as the mountains, but just since you're so close to it from the road here, the perspective looks like that. And so in order to make things look reasonable, I think we're going to choose the Mercator projection because that's just what we use for the sky. So if we use the same projection for the sky and for the foreground, we'll be more likely to get reasonable looking results that merge together. All right, so you can see now we have this here. Let's crop this one a little again, like kind of like we did for the sky. So then when we get in the Photoshop, we have less work to do around that. All right, and so I think this looks good. Another thing, well, we'll crop the bottom here too. Another thing you might want to do is you might want to go through the control point editor and delete worst control points. A lot of times it doesn't find any, but sometimes it does. So it could possibly improve your actual panorama results. So if we come back to the window here where we have the main PT GUI window here, we can create panorama. If it had found control points to delete, we would have had to re-optimize, and then it would have been like, okay, the image is still good, or you have to make more edits to it. So that's another step you would have to do if it had found inappropriate control points. So then you hit create panorama here. Again, the settings I have here are default, and those are the settings I like to use. If you're just installing PT GUI and you haven't changed the defaults, then you're going to have to make changes here. So we'll send to Batch Stitcher, and we'll save this in the same directory. We'll keep the name here so we can track it to the images we used. And we'll wait for this to export. This is going really quickly. Now that we've got these two images, the foreground and the sky, we'll hop into Photoshop. So we will cancel this. We don't need the individual images anymore. And we'll open here. We'll go to desktop and Blue Lakes 2. And then we have the two images that we want to open, right? The sky and the foreground panoramas. So it'll take a sec for this to come up. There we go. So now you'll see I have a lot of edits here in my Photoshop that you might not be used to. So you can ignore the bottom right here. This is some Deep Sky Astro specific plugins that I use. So they're not really applicable to a panorama of the Milky Way. But like a lot of the things on the left-hand side here are really useful. So you really want to be able to see the histogram of your image to see where the different colors are so that when you're balancing colors, you can see if things look good. Another problem you want to try to avoid is having your brights clipped or your dark points clipped. And so the histogram really helps out with that. And it also really helps because every screen you look at has a different brightness, and it's better to use a histogram to adjust where your brightness is supposed to be so that you have exact approximation where you want it, and not like you're not guessing based on your screen. So sometimes I edit on my MacBook screen here, right? And I can adjust the brightness there, and I know exactly how I want my brightness to look for different cases, whether I'm printing the photo or whatnot, or posting to social media. And it's a really good reference. But when I edit on my big 32-inch monitor that's right above my MacBook right now, the monitor shows the images a lot brighter than my MacBook screen. So the histogram is a great way to just reference and make sure that I'm not creating my image in a too bright of a state or too dark of a state. All right, cool. So now we have the Milky Way panorama here, and we have the foreground here. So we probably want to make some initial edits to both of these, at least balance the color. And so we have a few options for that. So I really like to use the camera raw tool. So the first step that I always take is I always duplicate the layer here, right? So we're going to call this like we'll call foreground backup. So if I really screw things up, we can always go back to this layer when we start from scratch. We'll call this one the foreground. And so I'm going to use a combination of Camera Raw and then the different tools that are built into Photoshop as the different adjustments. So we'll go to filter here, open up Camera Raw filter. And we want to get the colors right. So normally I have a preset that gets me pretty close, but for the purposes of this video, we'll try to, I'll show you my process for how I would do this from scratch. So I'm going to do what might look kind of stupid, but if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll have seen it before. I put the vibrance and the saturation to the complete extreme, and then I adjust the color temperature in the tint until I see white in the white points. So let's see what's white. There's some snow on the mountain there. So let's try to use that as a reference and see if, so you can see we're gonna have to really turn things green. Sorry, so that's probably too green. So we'll bring the greens back. And then the other thing you can do is you can look at the histogram here and see if things are getting close to overlapping. So we know that the image is pretty dark. So the histogram parts here, right, are the parts that you want to see lining up. So you can see that the greens and the reds line up really nicely, but it seems like there's less blues there. So we might want to try to bring some more blues in if we can. So it seems a little bit green, so I'll drop the greens a bit. And you can see that we're literally actually dragging some blues out of this image. We might actually be going too far with that, but maybe not. We will see here. So if we keep dragging it, and a good goal would be these hills here, of the histogram, you kind of want the back end of it to kind of line up. That's a general rule in astrophotography, that if you align those up, you're close to a proper white balance. And so obviously keep in mind when you're doing something like this, the colors are just going to look really crazy off, right? Because you're not actually trying to make it look good. You just want to make sure that your white balance is close. And then when you drop the vibrance and the saturation, you get something that looks usable. And so you can see that when I drop the vibrance and saturation, the road actually kind of looks like a gravel road here, right? And you can see that the LED screen for my other camera actually looks pretty good. You can look at the mountain too, and the mapping. You can see that even the histogram is pretty well aligned here. You can see the blues are in the mountain, which I like that look and feel. The whites look pretty white here, which is what you're aiming for. So that's a pretty good color balance, if you ask me. And so then you can just increase or decrease the saturation to your desire. Obviously, if you go too far with the saturation and vibrance, it might look unnatural. And a lot of times, I might actually decrease some of the saturation in a night photo in order to make it look realistic, or maybe I just fully embrace the unnaturalness of my photo, and then just keep it highly saturated. So the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to remove this camera here, right? Because we don't really need another camera in the photo. So we I use the remove tool here in Camera Raw. So there's a bunch of ways to do this in Photoshop. You can use the clone stamp tool and several other tools, but the Camera Raw tool, in my opinion, is really one of the best. So we click on one side and then we shift click to the other side, and we'll hit remove here, and we'll see how well that does. So let's turn it off. Let's see here. Yeah, so again, dirt spots are looking a little bit reddish, which I can't remember off the top of my head if the dirt there is red or not, but Like, what we'll probably end up doing is, the foreground is still maybe a little bit bright. We'll probably try to darken the foreground a little bit. It looks too much like a daytime shot now, even though it was shot, like, in the middle of the night. Alright, so I'm not seeing a lot of artifacts from that removal, so then we'll continue to remove stuff here. So we wanna remove the rest of the camera, so we'll do, click in one spot and then shift click to the other point. Then we'll select remove here. And we may have to increase the size of the removal in order to get this to work, or maybe it'll just work, I'm not sure. And that seemed to work, so we'll do same thing for the other tripod leg. And let's see here. I don't I see anything obvious. In a huge panorama, you're probably not going to notice if there's any small artifacts and stuff there. So that looks pretty good for purposes of this. And then we have a few options. We can just save this, which might be a good idea. So let's save the changes we made here. We'll duplicate the foreground again. And this is, we'll call this one now color balance. And we'll go to the foreground copy here, just call it foreground. And let's do one more camera raw filter edit on here, where we'll just do basic adjustments, contrast adjustments on here to make it look more like a night image and just add effects. So these are totally up to you, right? I'm just editing the way I like to see my images. So I like to add some texture, some clarity, and some dehaze. That really tends to bring out the detail. And it will help with the contrast. It will help the edge of the photo when it cuts with the sky. So we can make those changes, and then we'll go to the lighting changes here. And so for these, I want to be looking at the full photo. So we see here, right? There's the main thing here that looks really out of place is this road. It's like way too bright. It looks like like the sunset has just happened and like it's a little bit before dusk. And we actually want it to look like it was taken at night, like it was. So we can drop the highlights down a good amount here and see how that looks. That looks a whole lot better, right? It's still a little bit bright though. Let's see. So check the monitor. So on my MacBook, if you have a MacBook for reference, I keep the brightness at about 50%, which I find is a really good reference point for like transferring photos to my phone and to other devices, and for printing your photos as well, if that's what your goal is. So let's turn the whole exposure down a little bit and see what it looks like. All right, so you guys got to play with this until you think you're happy with it. So what I'm aiming for is I want it to look like it's at night, but I want it to be bright, because once I clip details in my photo, right, then those details are gone, right? So we definitely don't want to do that. And we can always make minor adjustments later on, either in the Camera Raw tool or with the other Photoshop tools. All right, so let's say I think this is pretty close. We'll probably make some small adjustments when we add the sky in the Photoshop tools, but we'll go from there. So another thing you could do at this point is you could go through your photo and see if you're happy with the detail. And so we already did some color noise. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but when you see color noise, you can see a lot of like different colors here, which I'm actually not seeing any of at all right now, at least in that part of the image. Like these are pretty clean. There is noise, don't get me wrong. Like we'll probably do a little bit of noise reduction to try to help out with that. And so again, sometimes this helps, sometimes it doesn't help. So So you can see it smooths it out, and you really don't want to do too much of this because the if you do too much noise reduction, then it could smooth out details, then you lose details. And an image panorama like of this many images that are 60 megapixels each, like you're not going to notice smooth details. Almost certainly not going to make any difference in the image. So you can do a little bit of noise reduction to try to make things look a little bit cleaner. So yeah, so I think that's good enough for now. So we'll hit OK here, apply those changes, and then we'll move on to the sky once it completes. So again, if you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, and I'll try to address them. So we'll come to the sky now. And again, we have the same issue we had with the foreground of the image. The sky needs to be color balanced, so we'll follow the same process. I'll just do it really quickly here. We'll just duplicate the sky in case we mess up the color balance or something, or clip it or something, accident, which happens. Then you have to start over. Sometimes I edit the same photo 4 or 5 times before I'm happy with it. And so we see the sky here, brought it up. We can do the same very quickly, the same color balance. And we know that it was something along these lines here. And so your color balance will be a little bit different, probably be a little bit different for the sky than the foreground. But you want to there's 2 approaches you can take for color balancing your skies and your foregrounds. So one is you can try to make them match each other, right? So the sky and the foreground both have a similar color. So if there's like green air glow in the sky, then you tint your foreground green so that matches. Or you can try to do something that's contrasting. So if you have like purple air glow in the sky, you might want to make your foreground greenish or something like that. Or if you're in Utah taking pictures of the red sand, right, you might make the foreground red with green air glow in the sky, right? These are different color palette combinations that could make sense together. So that's kind of how I think about it. In this one, right, we saw the foreground had a lot of green in it. So we'll have to see if there's any air glow in our sky that we can use to complement that, or if we want to do something like different with it. So let's see what we got here. So since this is an astro modified camera, you can see the nice nebulas here all throughout the Milky Way here, and they're really over accentuated here. So let's see here what we got. And so for the skies, I frequently use a lot more saturation and vibrance in the edit, because the details in the nebula or the air glow that are in the image. So this is pretty close to color balanced, I'd say. And you can see it seems like there's a little bit of a slight air glow on the horizon. So it was an interesting fact about this night. There was like lightning the entire night off north of me in the distance. So like I was really wondering if the lightning would affect my photos, because it was just constant lightning. And it didn't seem in the foreground that the frames were affected by the lightning. So remove those the same way I removed the other artifact in the camera in the foreground. So I'll go here, select the location, and then that one probably. And so then you just have to go through these one at a time. So once you've gotten them all out, then right, you have a really clean sky and it looks nice. So I have one star trails image on my Instagram you can look at. I spent probably 4 or 6 hours removing the star trails from the stacked images, because over the 2 to 3 hours that I captured that image, a lot of planes went by. So this can be a really tedious process, but it looks like there's only like 8 or 10 different ones here. So we'll try to get the worst ones. We'll see. Maybe we don't have to worry about all of these because they might get cropped out of the final image. I forgot to click remove. So we'll just go through a couple more of these. All right, let's see here. So I think we're going to ignore most of the things on the right side of the image. There's a big purple smudge there. I think we're probably going to ignore that purple smudge. I actually don't know what that's from. That's interesting. It is not normal to have that in my images. There must be some merging artifact from the from PT GUI. But I think we're going to be able to crop below this and just keep the top of the Milky Way with the foreground. I think that'll be the best composition anyway. Seems like there's 2 or 3 of these here. So yeah, so another thing is, right, we might not get the most perfect results because these are single exposures of the sky, and then we just merge them. It'd be better if I did a tracked exposure, and it'd be even better if I stacked a whole bunch of exposures. Then you would potentially get better results and less likely to have artifacts like that. So we can also try to brighten this a little bit, maybe. And then let's just do this all at once here. We'll just add some texture to the sky, add some clarity and dehaze. Again, this is one way to edit your photos. I don't always edit them the same way. And there are corresponding tools in Photoshop that do the same thing that I'm doing here in Camera Raw. So if you're comfortable with those and you prefer those, there's no reason to switch to using these. Then we can zoom in closely and we'll be able to see what color noise looks like. This green, purple, whatever globbiness that is just not pleasing. And when you zoom out, you might not see it as much, but when you zoom in, you can see. If we drop this to 25, we removed a lot of the color noise. We go up to 40. It's just blurring it. So I think we probably want to don't go more than 25 here. You can play with these sliders. But yeah, if we go to color noise, it's really not improving the image a whole lot. So there's really diminishing returns. I find that keeping it around 25 is good. There are a bunch of other tools that you can use for reducing noise. So we might want to do some correction here. And then, yeah. So with a panorama like this, the most important thing is when you zoom out, what does it look like? Because when people are posting on social media, they're just going to look at this and say, "Oh, it's a cool panorama," and they're not going to care about the color noise when you zoom all the way in because they'll see that. So for this purposes, we'll just leave it like this. If you were going to print 80 or 90-inch print, you might want to look at those details. So I think this is good. We will save these changes, and now we'll move into merging the 2 photos together. So it's going to take a second here. And at some point, maybe I can do a little tutorial on like how the Photoshop works in these layers, but now we have 2 layers here, right? This was the original foreground, and then the second one here is the edited one. And so we can copy this by hitting Control-C or Command-C on a Mac, Control-C on Windows. And then you move over to the image over here, and we can paste this. If the color spaces mismatch, it probably doesn't matter. You can convert them, and it should be fine. All right, and so you can see that it didn't quite fit. So we want to do a few things here. So first of all, we want to mask the sky. So there's a few ways to do that. So we can try the sky selection here. So we have to make sure the foreground layer is selected. We go over up to select sky, and that seems to have selected the sky reasonably well. All right, so what we can do then is we can just hit mask, and it will mask the, actually, we can turn off these layers. It'll mask the foreground by default. So you could either reverse the selection before you select, and then it'll select the sky, or you can make sure that you have your foreground selected with the mask selected here, and hit Command I or Control I, and it will flip the selection here. So if we zoom in really closely here, you can see it did a nice job cutting the the foreground here to the foreground a little bit. So you can see that you can kind of see through the mountain here, right? And so if you want to be really fussy about it, you have to sit here and paint it back in. So sometimes I don't actually use the, you can see over here, this is particularly bad here, right? Like this is not really good. You can't really see the mountain. I'll sit here and mask it in if I really care about the details, but sometimes I'll just add the sky layer. But I wanted to use the sky selection because of this tree here. So this tree is going to be harder to get right and get the colors right. And the auto sky select will do an okay job or good enough job to make that look reasonable. So the next step, once we've got the sky masked out, would be to add in the new sky. So to start off with, we definitely want to increase the size of our canvas here so that we can extend the sky. And so we'll just go to the crop tool here. So just so you know what I'm doing, go to crop tool. Let's cancel that. And then you'll bring up this tool. You'll click on the image, and then you can select and expand. So I usually like double the size here, and then I click done. And then I'm probably going to go back to one of the other tools because you don't want to accidentally select the crop tool, because then I could end up getting stuck doing something slow like this and you have to wait and start over again. So we wouldn't want to do that. So now if we select the sky layer, so the sky layer is on top here, but we actually want the sky layer behind the foreground layer. So now that we've selected the sky layer, dragged it behind the foreground layer, then we can Command T, which selects the sky, and we will drag the sky here. Now the goal is to line up these images as close as you possibly can. And so these are really lining up nicely. So let's see, we might want to hit done here, and we'll zoom in and see if we need to make some adjustments. Let's see here. Yeah, so you can see it's not quite aligned, even though from the line there. So I can, what I'm doing right now is I'm aligning using my arrow keys on my keyboard. So after you hit Command T, you can just start moving things around with the arrows. So again, if I'm moving too quickly for you and you have questions, just stop me. And so the general rule is you want the sky to be the be completely invisible from the sky photo, right? And so you can see that's not totally working here, where the foreground was not masterly, but we can come back and paint that back in a sec here. So let's see if there's any obvious problems here. Yeah, it looks like, and we can also let's hit enter. See, that should finish the transform. And then we can turn the sky on and off and see, yeah. So it looks like we're adding some trees in the background there. So that means we're going to want to do maybe a couple things. So one thing I noticed is that the sky seems to be at a smaller ratio than the rest of the image. So we're gonna expand the sky just a little bit here like this. And then we're gonna move it to the left side here. And we're gonna drag it down so hopefully the secondary trees are below the horizon, right? The goal is for those not to show up so that we only see one iteration of the trees from the foreground image. And this is not perfect. If you want to sit here and mask them in properly, we can definitely do that. But I'm not sure if I'll do that on this live. So I'm trying to figure out what it's doing because it keeps popping in and out here. Let's see. All right. And let's scroll across the horizon here and see if we have any weird things going on. All right. So you can see we're going to have to fix the snow over there because it looks like the background is bleeding off the foreground mask. All right, but I think for the most part, that looks reasonable. We've got the Milky Way coming down into the mountain like we saw in the original panorama. So it's a realistic merge of the sky in the foreground. And let's see here. Oh, that bush is going to be a problem. Let's see. We have a few options with this bush. We can try to align it. We could remove the tree. Yeah, that tree there is also not where it's supposed to be. We could just crop it. We could crop the photo. That actually might be the right choice because I think if we crop that out, the road is on the left-hand side of the composition, and then it will lead into the mountain. So I don't think I want to deal with that bush. That bush looks like it needs a lot of work, and not sure if I want to do a lot of work on this particular image. All right, so now we're gonna that we have a relatively reasonable alignment. It's not perfect. There were still a couple trees here that were off, but we can either deal with those or ignore them depending on what we feel like doing. We can crop this image down to something that we like. So we wanted to crop that side out there. And so you want to, at this point, you want to start thinking about the effect you want on the viewer of the image. So you can see here, right, you have the road coming into here, you have the Milky Way arch, you have the horizon line, you have the valley over here leading, and you have the light from the car, and then you have the Mount Snuffles here, right? And so those are all points in the image, right, that you probably want to think about. And so you want to, as much as possible, draw the viewer's attention into a specific point. And so for this image, I think we want to try to draw the viewer into the Mount Snuffles with the core of the Milky Way over it. That seems like the most important part of this image. So we want to remove everything in this image that is not adding to the viewer's attraction to that part of the image. And we also want to think about the proportions of the image as well. So you can see here, we have the Milky Way arch. It's coming up over the top of the image, filling that part of the frame in this crop. And it comes down to the to Snuffles, which is over here. And this may not quite be exactly in the ideal visual location for the center point, but I think this is going to work because we have balance over here visually. The road is leading in, at least in towards the middle of the photo, and then you've got the horizon line, the Milky Way, the valley, and the light all attracting your attention towards the mountain over here, which I think works pretty well. There are obviously other ways you can do this. So one thing I might do is I kind of actually see this tree down here in the foreground. I think I want to include that tree, the whole tree, and not crop it at all. So I'm going to drag this a little bit. It will also help because it's better if the visual point of attraction is at one of the 2/3 point here, or at the corner of the 2/3 point. So the closer we can get to that, the better visually speaking we've had our image in a proper visual composition, I guess you could say. So let's go with that. And then we'll wait a sec here while it crops. All right, so now we've got an image here with a sky in a foreground. And from the zoomed out perspective here, it looks pretty good, right? We still have a few things that we could probably try to fix. So the one really, really bad thing that we want to fix is this snow here, right? We don't want the background to be bleeding into the mountain. So what we do for that is we take the foreground mask here that we have, and then we select the brush tool, and right here, and then we have we want to paint in white because we want to include the foreground here. And so for this purpose of this, we'll just make a big mask, and then we can just select the snow back in, right? So this looks so much better. And so just so you know, I was using the square bracket. The left square bracket and the right square bracket will increase or decrease the size of your brush. So that's one of my favorite tools in Photoshop here. You can see the snow here was also messed up. Probably in a lot of these types of images, you're going to want to come through here, and if you use the sky select tool in Photoshop, come in here and paint back in your foreground here, because there's going to be artifacts. And then especially around trees and stuff, branches, sometimes I spend hours getting these painted back in properly on the edges of these, because this is a really big panorama and you can spend a lot of time going through it. And so you can see there's a line here where the sky image ends and this image begins. So you can also control the opacity. And so this is really low opacity you want to use for the edge of the horizon here, because you want to make sure the sky is shining through, but you're also like highlighting the background. But when you're just masking in the main areas of your image here, you can check your opacity to even 100%. Just use a really big brush and quickly just clean up your whole image. Just be careful not to mask into the sky. So if you do something like this, right, you can see like the image is just completely improving as I drag along here. Okay. And like you said, you want to be careful around the edges here because you mess it up, right? So it can really make things look weird. So yeah, so just do this throughout your whole image. And you can see just the image is just improved. The edge of the horizon here is just really improving the structure of it. And you can see where the other mask was, the auto mask messed it up. So continue. This was the really bad spot. So let's make sure we really get that. And then we can double check by zooming in and see, look, now it looks like an actual mountain. Now it doesn't look like a, I don't even know what it looked like. It looked like you could see through and see two mountains on top of each other. All right, so I think I got a little bit carried away here, and we got some star trails there from the foreground image, so we'll have to clean those up. But let's finish cleaning up this area of the photo here. And we'll just go across here. And oh yeah, we have those trees. Maybe we'll do something about those quickly if we have time. So I'm gonna try to wrap this up in an hour, just so I'm not keeping you longer, and we can show the final result. All right, so that was correcting just the mask problems on the foreground, and then we want to fix some of the bad things so that are off. So we'll use the left square bracket to reduce the size of the mask. We'll reduce the opacity down to 40 or some percent. We'll flip the color to masking in black, and then we will just come here and paint this off so that we can get rid of those star trails. that got added when we were fixing the edge of the foreground here. So that looks pretty good. And then let's see what else. You can see it's not perfect, but like no one's gonna notice if I post it on Instagram like that this tree is off or that tree for that matter. Yeah, it when you zoom out, it's mostly irrelevant. So we could do other things. We could try to flip to the white mask here, and then we can make that stand out more. That might be more realistic. We have a few options for this tree here. We could just leave it there. We could try to crop the sky more. I don't really want to move the sky around a whole lot because it'll change the composition of the Milky Way. What we can do is we can select the sky layer, and let's do this. We'll select the sky, Command T, and then we can change the perspective of the image. So we're going to call this, let's select warp, to drag the tree out of the composition if it lets me do it. Oh, there we go. I think it froze for a second there. So let's undo that. All right. There we go. Now we can see it in real time. And so that might fix some of our trees here. So let's zoom out and see if that destroyed the Milky Way arch or not. I think it still looks okay. So yeah, so now those trees that were really off are gone. See, maybe we drag. I don't think those trees are still coming from the foreground, which is cool. They can be there. All right, we'll scroll along here and see if there's anything that looks really off. We'll drag that down there. I think that looks better. We'll just scroll along the whole horizon and just check the details and make sure things are looking reasonable. The mask is not very good on that particular peak there, so maybe we do some slight masking there. So yeah, so I think that horizon line looks pretty good. If we click on there, there's no trees from the foreground or from the back of the sky showing up in the foreground image now. Wait for this transform to complete. And then let's see, let's do one last thing. We will go to the brush tool, opacity 43%. We want to select the foreground mask here, and we're going to mask this mountain back in because while we were doing the warp, I noticed that the mask was not painted in very well there. So see now the mountain is actually visible and not blending into the sky like it was. All right, cool. So this image is looking pretty good. I think there's some things we could do. We could try to make some vignetting or do something, try to draw the light towards the center. The bottom part of this image here, you could use a radial gradient to darken it so that the focus is more in the center. But yeah, this is mostly finished, and we're basically at the end of the hour. So if you have any questions, you can drop those in the chat. But thanks for joining the call today, and I hope you were able to learn something through my edit of this panorama. So be sure to join next week. We'll have another masterclass. I'm not exactly sure what the topic will be, if it'll be editing or some other process. We'll see. But on Saturday, if you're part of the My School community, which is linked in the description, you can join a question and answer session where I will answer whatever questions you have about your photos or your process or equipment or whatever astrophotography topics you would like to talk about. So hope you have a good evening. Thanks for joining.